Or you don't think men and women have equal rights?
Well, at the moment, Roe v. Wade was turned over federally, so that's a law that has control over women's bodily autonomy, and there is no law that controls men's choice over their body, so I think that's a discrepancy.
Actually,
men also can't get pregnant.
Actually, so hold on. There's three things I'll give you here.
It went right back where it was supposed to go. Back to the States. That's where it's supposed to go.
It's true.
Right back where it's supposed to go, and it was enacted the year I was born, 1972.
I think it's important to set federal precedents for things as important as that.
So I guess my count here would be, one, as it relates to reproductive rights, men don't have any reproductive rights. So in terms of there being a comparative inequality between men and women, I would actually say that if you wanted equality between men and women, and that was your stated goal, despite perhaps what women want or female advocacy, you would actually have to entirely roll back abortion rights completely for there to be a semblance of equality between men and women.
Bingo.
Because men have no reproductive rights, ergo, equality would dictate women should have no reproductive rights also. I know that wouldn't be what women want, but that would actually create equality.
Well, not necessarily, because women are the only one in the equation that can give birth.
I agree with you.
What is a woman?
I agree with you, but if we're doing a comparative...
Men don't ever have to make the choice of if they should hold a baby in their stomach or not.
Yeah, sure. I agree with that.
So the reason that women should be allowed to choose is because they will be holding the baby, whereas the men don't have that option. Therefore, there isn't a law to
I agree with you to the degree that, yes, you're right, only women... Well... I don't know if, depends on your... Yeah.
People with a uterus, sure.
Well, that's your words, not mine.
Yeah.
I agree with you, yes, only women can get pregnant. But again, if we're doing a comparison when it comes to, well, what rights do men have that women don't? Again, I would just say if we're doing a comparison of equality between men and women, you would not be able to say that it's something that uniquely impacts women. But if we're doing a comparison of rights between men and women...
I'm saying we're fairly equal on paper, sure.
Sure, okay. So, but your position was more so geared... Yeah, so we'll just move on to that. Your position was more so geared towards... Or wait, hold on. There's one other thing I want to say. You said men don't have any constraints on their bodily autonomy. This is actually state down, so that I'll give you three examples. I mentioned this before. Circumcision. I prefer to call it... infant genital mutilation.
I'd agree.
Well, infant male genital mutilation, because baby girls don't have their genitals mutilated in the United States. There's maybe like some, I don't know if it's like under Islamic, even then I'm pretty sure it's outlawed in the United States anyways. So this would be evidence of baby boys not being able to give their informed consent to have their genitals mutilated upon birth.
But there is an option. The parents hold the option. It is normalized that it does get cut. It usually gets cut without asking, but there is the option. So there is the choice.
I would say it's systemic in the sense that...
If it were illegal, that would be the issue, and that would be an equal discrepancy that you could suggest.
Right, but I would argue that there's no law, which I think there should be, preventing this barbaric and outdated practice.
I would agree then.
And so I think there ought to be a law that is...
choice.
No, there's no choice.
Oh, that you can't snip them
I don't
at
care
all.
what your religion is. You can't mutilate the genitals of a baby boy. That's my position. I don't care what your religion is. There's no religious grant. I think this is a barbaric practice.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the health standard exists either. I don't think it's...
Well, and I also think it's systemic too, because the entire healthcare system is systemic. You have an abundance of female pediatricians that are performing this thing. You have single mothers who are choosing to have their baby boys be circumcised, and then you have like a cultural and social phenomenon which kind of relates. I mean, there's like this argument about like it's healthier and cleaner and more hygienic. There's some disputes there. There's clearly other countries where there's not circumcision, and you can clean, the penis without the need for that. But the other component here would be like women's own stated dating preferences once they become adults is like, well, I prefer. So what impact does that have socially and culturally, where women have a really strong genital preference for men who are circumcised? And I would say that that's like another factor there. But that relates to bodily autonomy. The second thing I would argue is forced military conscription. The draft, that's clearly the state down saying, men, you can be ultimately sent off to some foreign country, or if it, in the event of like an invasion, I suppose, whatever, you could be sent to go and die effectively, or be harmed, or go to war. That would be taking away men's bodily autonomy. Further, if men don't register for the selective service, they can be, well, there's a whole bunch. They can't vote. They lose out on certain federal jobs, certain federal aid. They lose out. It's technically a felony, $250,000 fine. So there's all kinds of negative.
So you're against any laws that restrict male bodily autonomy, like being sent to the draft?
I'm against circumcision. The draft, I think, war bad, but also war is just going to be, unless there's some sort of like total massive shift in like a technological singularity where like the world we live in 50 years from now is like so far beyond, this would probably happen through AI or like advancements in technology so far beyond what our human minds can even comprehend, that war has just completely been eradicated. I don't think that'll be on the scale of 50 years, but I would say that as it currently stands, war is an inevitability. And so there are circumstances where I don't think it should be the case as a male advocate that men should be subject to war, and war is a specifically gendered male grievance, but it just is sort of a reality that nations and countries are not going to reject their ability to call upon its citizenry in the event of like an invasion or a war. Yes, the nations are going to reserve their right to force men to fight. Go ahead.
I just have to have something to add about war.
Okay.
My father was not drafted into Vietnam for one reason. And it was funny because we were, right after dinner, we were talking about it, and I have two other sisters. And my dad, he never had anything to drink at dinner, and still he had his milk right after dinner. And he was standing at the sink, and we're like, yeah, Dad, why weren't you drafted? Well, he was like, my balls were too big. Yeah, I guess bone spurs is a thing. And I guess having balls that are too big is a thing too. I don't know, I've never seen my dad's balls, but shit, right?
Shit,
yeah.
Shit, man.
Shit is right.
That's crazy, son.
Yeah.
Shit.
Somebody's balls are too big to get into military. There you go, or be drafted. Wow. So there it is. Just like
That's
Trump
crazy.
with his bone spurs,
That
it's
makes
true.
sense. I totally,
and a ball's too big is also freaking
Giant,
true.
Your dad had
My
elephant
father
balls.
has
too
got
many balls?
elephant, and of course he's the one with prostate cancer. So, but he didn't get the. He's not neutered.
I'm not trying to laugh,
He's not
but
neutered.
shit.
He's not neutered like that. He just got the prostate removed. But yeah.
Okay,
So,
and
just
then
to-
look, my final point here is when it comes to the men lacking bodily autonomy, in the event of, so for example, if the state can force men to work, and so we've done away, I think in the 18th century, or maybe it was the early 19th century, I forgot the exact date, we did away with debtors' prisons. So if you have a debt to somebody, they used to be able to send you to prison, right?
Correct.
No longer can you be sent to prison for a debt.
Nope.
Except as a man, if you owe child support to a woman. Now, again, to be fair,
If she
this
requests, she can request it.
hold on. So this is gender neutral, to be fair. A woman who's behind on her child support could arguably also be sent to prison. Although I would argue, first off, the majority of child support, I think it's 93%, goes in the direction of men to women. So it impacts some women, but it's overwhelmingly men. In the same way that you might argue that like SA, we would agree that men are also victims of SA, but you would probably say this impacts women more because they're more likely to be the victim or whatever. So in this case, that would be another example of men lacking bodily autonomy because the government can basically say, for example, and it could be under like really kind of shitty circumstances, like, for example, a female teacher could essay one of her underage students and she could get pregnant by that student where essentially she raped him, and then she gets pregnant. The state can then force that child to pay child support to her, despite there being a crime that occurred, and so forth. So that's kind of an extreme example, but another example that's probably a bit more frequent. There's a couple, maybe they're in a situation.
So do you support male bodily autonomy, or do you not?
Well, hold on, I'll get to that. But
okay.
So the more realistic example might be like there's a boyfriend and girlfriend or a situationship. They're sleeping together, but the guy's not wanting to have a child, and she gets pregnant. She unilaterally chooses to keep the child because women can do that. They can choose to get an abortion, and the man can't do anything. They can choose to keep the child. The man can't do anything. He can't opt out. So the men can essentially be forced into fatherhood and basically be debt slaves for 18 plus years, or sometimes even up to 21 plus years, depending on the state. So I'm in favor of male bodily autonomy, yes.
Okay.